Yo guys, welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're going to talk about how to train effectively as a football player, or how to train properly as a football player. And of course, this doesn't just apply to football players. If you're someone who plays with friends or competitively, it doesn't really matter. The aim of training sessions is to improve on the pitch, and so that's what we're going to cover in this video. So I have some points written down here that if you incorporate in your training sessions, very important points, key points that if you add in your training sessions, you should definitely improve on the pitch. And so I'm going to go through each point, talk about each point one by one, and talk about why it's important and why you should have it in your training sessions. Okay, so the first point we're going to cover is intensity. And you have to train at a really high intensity if you want to improve on the pitch. And it's kind of funny because, a lot of people watch pro players train, and, you watch them and you see their training sessions aren't really that intense. They're doing rondos, the sun's out, everyone's happy, and it doesn't look like a really intense training session. However, away from the cameras, when it's time to work, their training sessions are very, very intense, and you need your training sessions to be intense to improve when you actually play, because that intensity will then transfer over from your training sessions to your actual match. Now, a lot of people get a bit confused on what an intense training session should be like. A lot of people think it's just doing the drills faster, or just having your training session at a more faster pace. And yeah, speed is definitely an element to training intensely. However, what's more important, or what you should focus on overall, is exactly that focus and being deliberate with your session. If you can apply laser focus to your drills and to your session as a whole with a strong mentality, and doing things at a faster, quickening pace, that will then make your training sessions a lot more intense. And it's not always pretty, a lot of people think you need to be very professional with your training sessions. The drill should be very neat and tidy, and there shouldn't be any mistakes really. And that's not really true if you want to improve your actual game on the pitch. You're going to have a lot of mistakes when you train. If you're training right and intensely, you're going to have a lot of errors, there's going to be mistakes, and it's going to feel not very nice when you're training, because you're used to, doing drills perfectly and not making that much mistakes. Maybe you make more mistakes in your games and your training sessions, when really it should be the other way around if you're training to be more intense on the pitch. And so because you're doing things with more focus, more quickening pace, and you're trying to improve when you get onto the pitch, you're going to have more mistakes when you train, because ultimately you're trying to transfer that intensity over to your game. And so over time, as you really start to build that intensity in your training sessions, then when you go to your matches, or if you don't play matches, say you just play with friends, but you still want to be, intense, you still have that competitive nature in your friendly matches, you're going to then stand out because you've set that level of intensity in your training sessions. And so whenever players are getting tired, lethargic, they're making mistakes, you're still at that high intensity because you set that level in your training session. And so it's very important that you really focus on your training sessions and making sure they're intense. And it allows you just to be more of an animal when you just play in your matches. Okay, so for point number 2, we're going to talk about something that, a lot of players and people already know about, but they often forget to incorporate in their training sessions, and that's train specific to your position. Now, this is really important because your position, how you play your position is ultimately what's going to help your team do well and then obviously win the game. So training to your position, the way I like to think of it is almost as your position as like a completely different sport. Say if you're a midfielder, that's a lot different to say a goalkeeper or even a centre back. And so, like I said earlier, if you can do well in your position, that's going to really help your team, because then you're doing your job to the best of your ability. Now, what does it mean to actually train? What does your training session look like? So, for example, a bad one would be, say if you're, a centre back, but you're practicing sprinting and dribbling. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times during a game where a centre back will need to sprint. Well, in fact, there's a lot of times where they will need to sprint. But let's say for dribbling, for example, maybe 4-5 times out of 10 during the game, they will have to dribble. And even when they do dribble, it's not really, intense, like say a winger or an attacking player. It's more just a dribble into space just to progress the game. Whereas the things they should be focused on is things like tackling, positioning, communicating, maybe the first touch even. Those are the things you want to incorporate in your training sessions. And again, you want to train those with intensity, like we talked about. If you can do that, then that's going to really improve you as a player specific to your position. There's no point if you're a winger doing tackling and defending drills. Don't get me wrong, you will have to defend during a game at some point, and you will have to tackle, of course. But again, the chances of that happening more often than the other things you should do, like sprinting, dribbling, beating players, those things you should focus on more as opposed to the tackling and defending. And don't get me wrong, there is a place to learn those things if you are, say, pre-season, or if you have extra training sessions. And of course, practice on those things. Learn, some defensive things if you're a winger. Likewise, if you're a centre back, or even if you're a goalkeeper, learn how to sprint properly, get faster. Get comfortable with the ball if you're a goalkeeper. But in a training session that's really aimed to improve you, you want to focus on the things that you commonly do in a game. And again, another example could be a midfielder, or it's 9 times out of 10 that a thing that a midfielder would do during a game. Maybe it's turning out with the ball, having a good first touch, passing, long range passing, short range passing, positioning, maybe communication. Having priority to work over those things more in a training session as opposed to other things, it's going to help you improve in matches more than, say, learning other things that aren't so important. Okay, on to point number 3 now, and we're going to talk about setting goals for your sessions. Now, I'm guilty of this as well. Often when we train, we just kind of like go about our training sessions. We have an idea of what we want to train. Say, for example, we want to do shooting practice, or we want to do, dribbling drills or defensive drills. We have an idea, but we don't actually have a goal in our mind of what we want to accomplish during a session. And so it's important that when you're training, this is more important when you train solo as opposed to a team. If you do train for a team or you train with other people, still have goals in your mind that you want to have personally. Maybe you have a team session and you just want to, be a lot fitter than everyone else. Maybe that's a goal you have, or you want to complete the most passes, or, something like that. That's still very good to have. But where I think setting goals is more important is if you have a solo training session, because it's just you versus you and no one else is there really. It's just, how well you can train. And the only way you can gauge how well you're training is if the goals you set, especially if you trained previously and you want to set, higher goals, those are the things that's going to let you know, okay, I'm on the right track, if I'm training properly, if I'm improving. And so when you have your solo sessions, it's important to have a target or aim or goal that you want to complete by the session. And so an example can be, say, if we're doing a shooting session or free kick training session, maybe something simple like you want to score 12 out of 20 free kicks, or you want to, hit the side netting 3 out of 5 times when you're doing your shooting drills. It could be something just number based like that, or it could be something like you want to be more intense for longer during this session. It could be number based, or it can just be like idea based. So if we want it to be fair, it could be, I want to keep the ball this close to my feet when I go through the cones, or I shouldn't be hitting the cones at all during this session. And so it's important just to have a goal and expectation of what you want to accomplish during your session. Now, for the final point, I want to talk about, it's not really a point, it's more of a stigma, and it's, are cone drills, effective? Should you do cone drills? Should you not? And, there's kind of 2 camps to this. A lot of people think cone drills are really effective. The fundamentals are the basics, you should do those and improve upon those. And a lot of people are saying that, cone drills are a waste of time, you should just do free dribbling or just more dynamic things. And there's truth to both. Me personally, I think cone drills are very, very effective, especially if you're a beginner. They're gonna, really help you learn the fundamentals and the basics. But even if you're advanced, I think cone drills are very, very important. You have to think, what are cone drills designed to do? It's meant to let you gauge how good you are at doing a certain thing. So, for example, if you want to improve your dribbling, and you can do the classic cone weave, where you have cones set out 1 step apart in a straight line, and you just got to dribble through the cones. If you then hit a cone, or if the ball gets away from you, that lets you know instantly that you need to improve your dribbling still, because they're just stationary objects. If you can't weave around them at a decent amount of pace, then it's letting you know that you still need to improve this aspect of your game, which is your dribbling. And so I think that's what cone drills are very good at, just giving you instant feedback. Or if if you're finding those drills a bit too easy, say for example the cone weave is a bit too easy for you, then I would do it with more intensity, which is obviously going to help doing it at a quicker pace. That's going to still improve your dribbling. And even if you're finding that too easy, just make the drill a bit more dynamic. Maybe instead of having the cones evenly spaced, have them a bit, unevenly spaced, have a short cone, then have a longer space. That then will just mix it up a bit. But definitely cones, especially for solo training, by yourself, cones are going to be very important. They're definitely going to help you improve. Again, mixing that with intensity and some of the things we talked about here, train specific to your position and so forth, cones are definitely going to be a big help to you. Okay, so I think we basically covered all the points on how to train to improve on the pitch. Of course, there are a few more points we could talk about, things like mentality and whatnot. But I think these are going to be the most, practical and important points, especially if you're just either starting off or, you want to improve as quick as possible. Following these things, adding these things in your training sessions, you're going to see a lot of improvement in a short amount of time. So I hope this video helped you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.